Welcome to The Route to Success. Today's conversation focuses on a window that shapes the entire trajectory of a leader's success, the first 90 days. Research and real-world experience show that most leadership fails are not about capability. They come from misreading culture, moving too fast, or focusing on the wrong priorities early. In this episode, we sit down with Neill, Marshall, and Kurt Mosley, who have spent decades working with executives in complex healthcare systems. They have studied what works, what fails, and the specific actions leaders take in their first 90 days that build trust, credibility, and long-term results. This is not theory. This is what we love here at The Route to Success. This is tactical. You will hear real stories, real missteps, and clear tools you can apply immediately, whether you are stepping into a CEO role or starting a new position on a team. Kurt, Neill, welcome. Thank you so much for being here today.
Hey, thanks for having us, Sarah.
It's good to be here.
All right, so let's talk origin story. And we did meet before to kind of finalize questions. So you guys mentioned in that conversation that this started with a hospital CEO who moved into the hospital for 90 days. Can you walk us through that story and what the extreme example taught you about focus, visibility, and commitment in the first 90 days?
Yeah, absolutely. So Kurt and I both work for Health Search Partners. We're an executive search firm, and we specialize in healthcare. And all we do is hospital executives. And we were interviewing a hospital CEO. And, we said, okay, well, tell us how you started or whatever. He said, well, when I went into this assignment, my newest assignment, my wife stayed home to sell the house and move the kids, and I moved into the hospital. And Kurt and I looked at each other and said, yeah, Richard, we know everybody works hard in the first 90 days. He said, no, I move into the hospital. And we were like, well, tell us about that and tell us what happened and tell us the story. And we got off the Zoom, and I said, that is really interesting. I've interviewed 10,000 hospital executives, and I've never heard anybody that did something like that. And so we started doing research, and we started talking, and we interviewed 30 or 40 executives who had really strong tactics that they used in those first 90 days. And it really resonated with us. And what it taught us was that we feel like that the leaders who succeed early don't stay at a distance. They immerse themselves. They get close to the culture, the people, and the problems. And that's what Richard did. And so that's how it started.
I love it. Okay. Shall we move to the biggest mistake leaders make? You said misreading culture is one of the main reasons leaders fail. Can you share a real example of a leader who got this wrong, what they missed, and what they should have done differently in their first few weeks?
Well, great question, Sarah, but you're right. The biggest mistake is really misreading the culture. And culture is the multiplier. And people say, what is that? Well, you can do 10 things right, but it's the multiplier. If you do one thing misreading the culture, it'll negate all those 10 positive, whether symbolic acts or actions that you did. We had one leader come in and he started changing processes, restructuring, making decisions, moving fast. On paper, everything really made sense, but he didn't understand the informal relationships, the history, the culture, or why they were done in a certain way. And within months, he really, in a short period of time, he'd lost the organization. And once you lose that trust early, it's really hard to get it back. It's really hard. And what he should have done was simple. He should have slowed down, listen, and understand before acting. And most leaders don't fail because they're wrong. They fail because they move too fast without context. And as we always say in our earned authority, first of all, you have to understand the culture, learn the culture before you have the authority to change the culture.
So culture is something that I hear a lot about in the podcast. And I was wondering, could you recommend maybe one question or one tip or one way to really start to learn that culture? Because it can be hard when you come in as a new kid, right? And you're like, and you feel that pressure. And I know we spoke about this in our previous call, the pressure to come in and do what the board hired you to do. But it is about that pause. But what is maybe one way you can really start to learn that culture?
I'm going to give you two ways. One, at the board level, if you're talking about that, is get the board to define the culture. Have everybody ask what is the culture, and have them define it, and have them agree. See if there is a consensus on the top 2 or 3 things that they talk about with regards to the culture. But ask, what is the culture? Tell me about the culture. Ask. The second is, we had a CEO who, one of the questions that he asks is, if we're successful in the first 90 days, what is different? And by going through and asking his 242 leaders in the organization that question, things will bubble up. And the things that bubble up to the top, the things that are talked about again and again and again, that's how you develop your strategic plan and your plan for the next year.
So I don't want to minimize something so important and so valuable. What it sounds like to me is to go in with a willingness to hear and ask great questions with the intention of learning.
Intention of learning and doing. Right?
And doing.
Right? Is everybody talks about, well, in the first 90 days, I ask a lot of questions. Well, okay, so learn, but then act upon what you learned.
Okay. All right. So let me repeat this back to you. So we're going to go in. We're going to be very open to listening. We're going to be very open to observation. And we're going to ask really great questions where we learn what maybe the challenges are, what the positive things are, how the culture works. And then within that 90 days, create a plan of action that you present and work on maybe the first item.
Absolutely. Yeah. With the things that bubble up to the top.
Okay. All right. Thank you for bearing with me there. I just wanted to work that out and get that
You got
out.
deep. You got deep in that one.
I did. Because I will be honest with you guys. You guys have really, you didn't force me. You have inspired me to reflect on my previous CEO experiences when I was that CEO. And thinking about the first 90 days, I can see now looking back where I failed. And it's been a very humbling reflection. And now I own a business and I work as a consultant and I host a podcast. And so it's like, well, the reflection in the first 90 days is very different for me because it is moving with different contracts. But it's that willingness to listen and change of perspective and change and then taking action. And I really like that. And I love the inspired to reflect that I've gotten and the way it's helped me really identify missteps and ways to improve that. And I really hope that everybody here can have that same similar experience. All right. My next thing, and this is something that let's just get this out on the table. Let's call all the elephants out in the room. This is something that I am most guilty of. So know that when we go into this, it's be quick, but don't hurry. And I'm one of these people where I just move like this, right? So you use the phrase, be quick, but don't hurry. What does that actually look like day to day? And can you give a story of a leader who moved too fast and what practical steps someone can take to slow down without losing momentum?
Sure. Well, Sarah, the phrase comes from John Wooden, who is a UCLA basketball coach. And I think he still has a record of winning 7 national championships in a row. And he used to tell his players, be quick, but don't hurry. And the phrase sounds simple, but it's hard to live out. And what it means is show movement without rushing those decisions. And we've seen leaders come in and make big calls in the first 2 weeks, organizational changes, strategy shifts, and they end up fixing the problems. But sometimes, Sarah, it's the wrong problems. And the better approach is move quickly to learn, but move deliberately to act. Let me say that again, move quickly to learn, but move deliberately to act. And what does that look like on a day-to-day basis? Well, lots of meetings, lots of listening, asking questions, and holding off making major decisions. And what we caution our leaders is be active, but not be reactive during that first 90 days. Because again, the leaders that break trust, sometimes lose the organization right underneath them. And move too fast, Sarah, and you break things. You move too slow and you look weak. So again, it's a fine line you're walking during this time. And you asked for example, but I'll talk about what Neill talked about with Richard Parks. I'd like a success of moving, be quick but don't hurry. After Richard Parks spent one night at the hospital, he made an offhand comment to the residents he was living with about the room mattresses and how bad they were. And it was nothing strategic. There was no committee, just a real frustration. But the next day, Richard Parks went out, got 4 trucks, went to Costco, got a purchase order, and he replaced all the mattresses. That's it. No announcement, no rollout plan, just action. Again, so what he did, he was slow to decide what mattered, but once he found out there was a problem, that the guys weren't sleeping well, and you want your residents to be fresh when they're taking care of the patients, it's patient safety at first hand. But he moved fast once he knew what the problem was. And then within 2 weeks, the organization saw him as somebody that listens, somebody who acts, and somebody who gets it. And it's a phrase we use a lot, but getting it is a hard thing in the first 90 days.
So some things that I want to pull out here that I heard that I think are so powerful is, yes, be quick to identify problems. And so if you're somebody like me, I would have a list of them, right? Not like a shame list or anything, just a list for myself. Here's what I've noticed. And then I would sit down with my leaders and say, of these problems that I've noticed, which ones are the priorities? And then I would literally rank them in order of priority and tackle them one at a time. And what I'm hearing you guys say, I love, it's once you know what the problem is, once you know what the solution is, do it. There's no reason to sit around and hem and haw. Another point that I would like to circle back to that I think might be one of the biggest nuggets that you have dropped today is what Richard Park did. And so bear with me while I talk this out, right? What he did to a lot of people would seem so small. He replaced the mattresses. It's not a big deal, right? And most people would even say, why does that matter? But what I have come to really learn on reflection in a lot of different areas, what builds those relationships is not the big things. It's the little soft things. It's the little moments. And it is the fact that he heard and he observed. And replacing the mattresses, I would dare to say wasn't about the mattresses. It was about showing I'm a team player. I hear you. I care. And I want to know what other little things I can do to support you. Because if we think about any relationship, and I say this to my daughter all the time, right? It's always the littlest things that break us. It's never the big things. So it's always the littlest things that build us, not the big things necessarily. I don't know if you guys would agree with that, but it's those little soft shifts. Like if a leader notices that everybody likes one brand of coffee and he buys that brand of coffee specifically. It's the little things. I don't know how you guys would agree with that.
Absolutely. It's you're important enough that what's important to you is going to be important to me, and you are important enough. Yeah.
And you know what I love is it's not saying it, because I have leaders I work with every day that I'm like, it doesn't matter what you say to your team. I mean, it does. Please don't. It does. It matters. Your words carry power. It's the actions that follow those. It's the after a meeting, high-fiving somebody, they did a great job. It's the little email at the end of the night that is, hey, I saw what you did today and it was really great. It's those little things and those actions that people can see that really build that trust. And I would even say invest in culture.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. As a matter of fact, we'll talk more about, we call them symbolic acts, but acts that move mountains.
Mm-hmm. So of course, classic Sarah, you guys are getting all the classic me todays. I jumped ahead without even knowing it. Okay. Let's talk about building trust, specifically building trust in 1 week. And I'm fascinated by this concept. So you shared that people are not expecting brilliance. Let me stress this again. When a new leader comes in, people aren't expecting brilliance. They're looking for trust. What are 3 to 5 specific actions a leader can take in the first 30 days to build trust quickly? And can you tie that to a real example?
Yeah. And I might get a little long-winded here because I'm going to give you a couple of examples. A couple of them are pretty easy, but there are a couple of them I'll give you some examples. But what do you do? First, everybody said, be visible, right? Be out there. People need to see you. Second, listen more than you talk. Ask questions. Don't give speeches. Ask questions. And then do, right? Third is what we call the symbolic act. Do something memorable to demonstrate something to your team. So there was a hospital CEO here in Dallas, very famous, in our area, put together the largest hospital system in the DFW area. I mean, it's huge. And everybody knew that when Doug Hawthorne was coming to your hospital, everything better be ship-shape, because Doug would walk through the hospital, and if there was a light bulb out, he didn't point it out. He didn't yell. He didn't scream. He said, get me a ladder. And he got up on the ladder and he replaced the bulb. If he saw trash, he picked it up. He fixed it. Again, never yelling, but everybody knew. And the last thing you wanted was to see Doug Hawthorne on a ladder. So a symbolic act, right? The fourth one, and we'll talk a little more about this also, but get the team a win. Fix something small that matters to your team. Okay? We call it early wins. Get an early win, not for you, okay, but for a stakeholder group or your team or your employees. Get a win. And the last one is follow through. And we talked about the hospital CEO that went and met all 242 of his leaders in the first 90 days, right? And asked them, if we're successful, what's different? The other thing that he did was he went to them. Okay, never asked them to come to his office. He met them in their office. So he went to them. And the third thing he did was he didn't try and fix it. He couldn't do everything everybody wanted. But what he did share with them was, after I'm done with this, the things that are consistently important to everyone, we're gonna tackle, and we're gonna tackle it as a team. And to me, all of those things together is how to build trust.
So much good stuff there. Yes. So let me ask you a question, totally throwing another curveball at you. So get a win, but wouldn't you guys also maybe say celebrate the win and celebrate the team? I feel like celebration is a huge part of that.
Yeah, you know what? I don't think like that, Sarah. I think about
I don't either.
No, but it's absolutely relevant, and you're exactly right. Celebrate everything you can. I'm more like, I'm more like the top 10. Get the win. But yeah, no, I agree with you 100%.
And
so thank you. As a matter of fact, we're going to change that, and we're going to start talking about get the win and celebrate it.
You're welcome. So I, as a leader, and again, you guys have triggered me. And triggered is the wrong word. That's a negative word. You have inspired me to reflect on my leadership journey and to really identify places. And that is something I didn't do. And when I sat back and even looked farther, something I didn't do as a parent for a long time. So for me, that was definitely a learned skill. I am too much, maybe a little bit like Neill, maybe like people listening to this, where I have my to-do list and I'm focused on to do, meet need, do this, get the next win. That I forget to celebrate. And when I started mixing those celebrations in, I saw that more positive results and resiliency among teams. And so that's the only reason that I brought that in. But those are really great. And I would say, if you didn't write those down, please just go back and listen to that 3-minute piece of this podcast, because those were huge pieces of wisdom that I would say you could do at any level when you enter into a job.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So kind of circling back again to where I had talked about, it's the small things. So set tone through small actions, right? You talked about something as simple as walking slowly through the office instead of rushing. Or I love the example that you gave. Forgive me that I don't remember the gentleman's name. Where in the first 90 days, he met with all 243 leaders, but he went to them. That is something that's going to sit with me for a long time because of how positive that was. Because when you go and meet somebody in their office versus yours, you're almost removing all of your power and giving them the power. It's such a vulnerable move. It's so amazing. So small things like that. Can you share a story where a small symbolic action either built trust or damaged it? And what should leaders be intentional about in those daily moments?
Yeah. So I'm gonna stay on the positive one, Sarah. So one of the ones, and frankly, I didn't understand it as a symbolic act when it happened because I was very early in my career. But my first job out of college, I was part of an executive training program. We had like 4 or 5 of us, and they fired our CEO. So we were getting a new CEO. So the day he arrived, Grover Martin pulled up into the parking lot. We were all looking out the window, right, watching him come in. And he parked in the parking lot, walked through the parking lot, and picked up garbage. Walked into the warehouse, threw the garbage away, then came in, introduced himself, never said a word about the garbage, right? But from that day forward, we were all real young, aggressive. Every single one of us showed up 15 minutes before he did. And we walked the parking lot. Grover Martin never picked up another piece of garbage again. But again, never said a word about it. But what he showed us was we understood that there was a new standard. And that resonated. And so that's what we did. And I think Kurt's got one too.
Well, Sarah, we've seen the opposite too. Jim Decker, he wrote a great book. It's called Reviving the Heart of Leadership. And he was a former CEO. But these small acts, if you will, he started his first meeting and he wanted to make an impression. So he went to the local Dunkin' Donuts, which had just opened, and they were starting to be really popular across the nation. But he brought in the donuts, and it actually hurt him because he didn't understand the culture behind it. And you say, what's culture have to do with donuts? Well, little did he know they used the same baker in town for the last 20 years, and everybody had their favorites, and everybody knew whoever got the donuts, which board member or doctor, whatever, liked what he did. But one good thing about Jim Decker is he said, I learned from that. He said, you never lose, you learn. So in his book, he talks about a great quote. He says, never let a good crisis go to waste. So he went to the bakery he was supposed to go to, found out what everybody liked, making sure he got the right donuts for the right people. And these small actions aren't small. And everything you do in the first 90 days is interpreted as a signal. So you better be intentional about what you're signaling and make sure your audio matches your visual. People always say, how do you communicate during the first 90 days? Your audio has to match your visual.
I could not agree more. It's like when your parents tell you one thing, but they do the other, right?
Yeah.
It really is that simple. I love that. And so something that I always say is you never fail if you can learn something. Kurt Decker said it so much. Did I get his name right? Please say
Jim Decker.
Jim Decker. Oh, I was so close. Jim Decker. I love how he said it better than me about never lose an opportunity to learn. Again, butchered it there.
Never let a good crisis go to waste.
Right. Never let a good crisis go to waste. You never fail if you learn something. And I love how he turned that into such a positive. And I love how he was so vulnerable just by going to the small town bakery. And I'm sure he stood there and he was like, listen, I messed up and I need your help. You know how powerful that is. And I'm sure that story got back to his staff.
Everybody.
That's amazing. Yes. Yes. Okay. So here's something that you guys definitely brought up that I had never thought about before. And I'm so curious about this, and I'm still trying to figure it out. Negotiating a win before day one. The idea of negotiating a win before you even start is powerful and something I didn't even know you could do, which sounds so stupid. But I guess it's one of those things you don't know until you know, right? Can you walk us through a real example, like the nurse salary increase
Yeah.
or a different story, and break down how someone listening could apply that in their own role?
Sure. And you know what we talk about in negotiating your win before is if you recognize something during the process that just absolutely resonates, that this needs to be fixed, but it's going to take something to do that, either permission or resources or whatever. You say, look, I want to do that. I want to do this. I want to make this change. And you do that during your negotiations. You know, everybody knows you negotiate your salary and title and all of that, but you can also negotiate a win. Okay. So we had one CEO who, during the interview process, it became very clear to him that nursing salaries were too low. They hadn't changed them. They were not competitive. It was just, and everybody talked about it, right? And so what he did was when he was negotiating, the board said, we want you. And he said, I want you, but I want to make the nurses' salaries competitive. Here's about what it's going to cost. And I need the board to give their okay that we can do that. And we can do it starting minute one. And so by the time he actually arrived, he already had credibility, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like I said, he made it part of his agreement. So he didn't show up having to prove himself. He had already delivered something even before he showed up.
So playing a little bit of devil's advocate here, he identified a problem quickly and then he resolved it. Is that, and I'm sure that was a priority. What do you think the fallout would have been if he had waited until within his 90 days to do that? Or do you think there wouldn't have been a fallout?
But you don't know, right? But when you're talking about something as resource intensive as raising nurses' salaries by 25%, when you can consider that in the variable cost in a hospital, the largest cost is labor, right?
Right.
So that was really, really a little thing. Yeah, you can wait, but something like that, where you say, look, this is what I want to do, but it's going to cost us a lot of money. I mean, a significant amount of money, and that's why the recommendation is to get that up front. Because you don't know, you could start and say to the board, hey, we need to raise the nurse's salary, and they're like, no, we're you know, we don't have the money, or we don't have this, or we don't. No, you get it up front.
And I would venture to say, what I would even estimate is he may have in the long run saved him money, because think of the expense of interviewing or placing the ad, interviewing, hiring, and the overtime. That he probably reduced the overturn within the nurses by an incredible percentage. Yeah,
and no, you're exactly right. But and the bottom line is you have to be competitive. If you're not, the good nurses are leaving.
Oh, for sure. Okay, let's talk about something that is very passionate to me, having a nonprofit background: managing board and stakeholder pressure. Many leaders feel pressure to deliver immediate results. How do you coach and mentor leaders to push back and reset expectations? And can you share a story where somebody did this really well, and maybe what exact language or approach they used?
You know, Sarah, boards want action. That's just the reality. I mean, it is what it is. But the best leaders that we've seen and we've worked with reset their expectations before they start. So when they're walking in, and we coach leaders to say different things or to establish a dialogue early, say things like, my first 90 days are going to feel slower than you expect, because I'm going to focus on understanding the culture. I'm going to be building relationships, and I want to set the right foundation. And that's how we get this right long-term. And we've seen leaders do this well. And the key is confidence. You have to have that confidence. You're not asking necessarily permission, but they're setting the approach. And if the board pushes back too hard on that, it's actually a red flag. And you need to come back and say, listen, I'm not slowing down. I'm just sequencing my speed. And that's a key. I mean, you have to be sequencing your speed to make sure you're making the right decisions. Because if you can't take the time to understand the organization, you're almost guaranteed to make the wrong decisions up front. And the leaders that get it right are the ones who align expectations early and don't get pulled into this short-term thinking, or don't get pressured by the board to do something in the first 90 days. And I think, Neill, you have a example that we've used in the past.
Probably several. Had one CEO who the board didn't understand how big a trouble financially that they were in. Okay, they truly didn't understand. And what he had to do was really spend some time helping them understand exactly what the financial pitfalls were and where they were, so that when he started making those changes, their expectation level was right and they were supportive of making those changes. If he had just done them without them truly understanding how big, how much trouble they were in, they would have gone nuts. Because they would have thought that they didn't need this much disruption and this much change.
So I just want to stay here for 1 minute, because sadly, you guys are not the only people who have brought that exact same example, or similar, let me say similar example to this podcast. And so a couple of things that I am hearing from you guys is, one, manage expectations. Two, and I'm going to say this a little bit differently than you guys, set the baseline, define what success is going to look like, and then educate through the process. And the reason that I say that is because I've encountered this, again, sadly, in so many situations, is when you're in financial trouble or when the board doesn't fully understand the extent of the situation. What so many people, leaders, and I am saying, I'm pointing the fingers all back at myself in this example as well, too, is we think it's our responsibility to fix that. And it's not. It's actually the board's responsibility to assist with that and walk alongside of you. And so when you manage those expectations, you define the problem, set the baseline, say this is what success is going to look like, and educate through. That's when you build those relationships and you build that culture, not just with the board, but also with the organization and your key leaders. Because I think your key leaders are going to have less panic and fear over changes if they understand what that baseline is and are able to walk through with education as well. That's how I would kind of reiterate what you guys said, but please challenge me.
No, no challenge. I absolutely agree. I love the word snapshot, because we counsel, take a snapshot day one, right? It's kind of like, so my wife, she did so many unbelievably brilliant things. One of the things that she's always done is we have every single Christmas card we've ever sent out, because all of it, you know, with the kids' pictures, right? And we put them out every Christmas, and we can see the very first one when Catherine was 3 months old to the latest one, right? So you take the snapshot, and then as you move along, you take snapshots, and then you remind everybody what the snapshots, the older snapshots, look like. And you have to be very intentional when you do that, right? My wife didn't throw the pictures away. You have to keep each snapshot and be able to explain it, so that a year down the road, if they start talking about an issue or problem, you bring up the snapshot and you say, remember, this was a problem day one. Okay, this is not a new problem. This is something that we've been working on since day one.
Mm-hmm. So something I would like to say, a couple of things I'd like to say to you guys. First of all, an extreme amount of gratitude for the amount of reflection and personal growth that you guys have inspired within me. I know that wasn't the goal in this conversation. I know the conversation was to highlight you guys, but I wanted to start with gratitude and share with you the positive, amazing impact you guys have had in me. And I say that because I know that every person that listens to this will have the same positive impact. The second thing that I would love to say is all of the amazing, wonderful gems and pieces of wisdom that you guys shared will work for leaders in any field. They are not
Yes.
healthcare specific.
No,
Absolutely.
And so if I remember correctly, you guys have a newsletter that goes out. If people would like to subscribe to that newsletter, is that possible? How can people stay in contact with you? How can people continue to learn from you and the wisdom that you guys have?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're both very active on LinkedIn along with our organization. So go to our LinkedIn pages. Also our website, healthsearchpartners.com. Just like it's spelled, healthsearchpartners.com. We have landing pages for all of our written work and podcast work and all of that. And there is a way to sign up for our monthly newsletter.
Glad I remember that. And what I have said in all the conversations that I've had with each of you guys, be it email or in person, I have learned so much, and I don't work in healthcare. So I just want to stress that you guys are amazing at what you do in healthcare. So please don't think I'm minimizing that. But I want people to look at this very creatively and out of the box, that any leadership advice is great advice. Take it and learn from it, and you can learn a lot. And I think the great thing about studying leadership in healthcare is it's such high pressure, high change, fast paced, dealing with insurance companies, all of this in boards, that you're really going to be able to see people at full test pressure and really be able to learn from some amazing situations that you guys can share.
No, I absolutely agree. Yeah.
So again, such amazing gratitude. Something I would like to share is that what I've taken away, one of the many, many things, I don't want to minimize this podcast at all. It's going to take me days to reflect on this. Your first 90 days, it's not about proving how much you know. I would almost say it's proving how well you can listen, identify problems, and start making solutions happen. And it's always about building trust, reading a room, and setting the tone for everything that follows. And something that was said to me once that sums up so greatly what has been said is start the way you intend to go through. Just start the way you intend to go through, right? And don't rush, listen, observe, and act with intention. And if anything, please follow Neill and Kurt on LinkedIn. I do not have any of these answers that these men do, but I can point you to them. And if you need any connections to them, I'm happy to make email introductions. That is something I do. I'm a conductor. Neill, Kurt, thank you for the hour that you've given me so much more than an hour. Thank you for what you've given me. Thank you for all of this time. Is there any last words you would like to leave with other than my extreme gratitude? What would you like to end this on?
Yeah, I think that if you ask us what's the one thing that we've learned after, these 10,000 interviews and focusing on this first 90 days, is that the first 90 days aren't about proving you're right. They're about proving you understand the organization and earning the trust to be able to truly lead it.
And if I can add parting comment, don't forget that you're on stage. Shakespeare said it, all the world's a stage. Your behavior is what people are watching, not your edicts, your emails, what you're sending out. They're watching your behavior. So again, make sure that your audio matches your visual.
Kurt, Neill, thank you so much for this today.
Thank you, Sarah. We enjoyed being here.
Thank you, Sarah.